Pictures have this incredible ability to bring people together without a caption.
What an amazing job she has and what she's seen and the project she's been involved with around the world.
A photograph was the thing that proved that it was real, and now it's doing the opposite. And I think it's important with that rich visual history that we are also preserving that provenance. Like, this is real.
Welcome to the Being Human podcast with Amelia and Jez Francis. Brought to you by Just Add Water.
Hello, I'm Amelia Vegting.
And I'm Jez Francis. Welcome to the Being Human podcast, where with our amazing guests, we continue to explore what it means to be human in this world we find ourselves living in.
In preparation for our conversation today, I was scrolling through my camera roll and I ended up finding about 10 versions of the exact same photo. It's the same angle, same moment, just all ever so slightly different.
Just one more shot 10 times. Yeah, I do that as well. And then I never go back and delete any of them. So my phone's basically a museum of almost identical moments.
What are we actually trying to capture in that moment? You know, why do you need 10 versions of the same picture other than to increase your chances of getting everyone with their eyes open and everybody smiling in the same one?
And we put a lot of effort into curating the perfect photo, don't we? And then often, I find anyway, maybe it says more about me, but when you look at the picture, it doesn't feel anything like how it felt to be there when it was taken. The emotion of the experience doesn't always translate or doesn't always come across. And maybe that's because sometimes taking the photo itself removes you from the experience, perhaps.
And I do think there is that balance to be struck, because I personally like going back through and having memories of really fun times that I've had with friends and family. But you are right. It can distract from being completely present in that moment that you're experiencing. So I think the default reach for the phone can definitely stop people being fully present in what they're doing. So I don't think it's an either or thing. I think there's kind of a balance to be struck. It's not, it's not completely black and white, unless of course you've got your black and white filter on.
I'm trying not to be negative. Yeah, no, you're right. Some of the gigs I've been to recently are addressing this head on by banning photography or capturing video. We went to see Tool last year in London, and if you were caught taking a photo or a clip, I mean, they were very explicit on the tickets as you were walking into the auditorium, and then even the band themselves kind of announced it.
Really announced it.
I think it was because they're quite a creative band, quite spiritual, and I think they wanted to create an experience, like a journey, a trip almost, that you were going on with them, that people with their phones held aloft inevitably would somehow sort of take away from.
Okay, so here's a question for you. Have you ever seen a photo of yourself and thought, that's just not me at all?
All the time that happens. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story. So, my dear mother, she was looking at a picture that we had on the mantelpiece of the kids and me.
Nice.
And she said, I don't remember being in that photo. And I said, what are you talking about? That you're not in it. And she said, well, who's that? And I said, that's me. So my 86-year-old mother...
didn't recognise you.
We do both look a bit like Judi Dench, so... That's probably why. I do know what you mean. Sometimes you look at a picture and you think, well, it's clearly me, but there's not an emotional connection to when it was taken. You don't feel it in the same way.
No, and, maybe it isn't about capturing the raw data when we take a picture, but more about provoking that emotional reaction, maybe more around our values and what we believe in. Taking photos and photography is storytelling in many ways. A topic really close to our hearts at Just Add Water, and the work that we do with teams and leaders on using story and narrative to move people to think, feel, and then act differently. And photography is absolutely another medium that can do that.
So look, this idea of images and video to move people to feel, to think, and then act differently is very much where the conversation we're going to have today is heading with Kira Pollack, who spent her entire career shaping how the world sees, remembers and understands imagery and visual stories. So before we get to Kira, I've got a slight twist, if you don't mind, for boring things about me.
Boring things about me.
Talk us through how we're going to do this.
We share some boring photos from each other's phone, and then producer Chris votes on who's taken the most boring picture.
Love it. You should go first, Jez.
Here we go. Have a little look at those.
We've got what I believe is a kitchen counter.
Yep.
With some hot cross buns.
Yep.
Quite zoomed in. Not really sure what we're gaining from this one. Oh, we've got little Dennis in the sea.
Yep.
That's not boring. So I think you get minus points for dog. Pets are never dull. Oh, this is a good one. A parking sign with maximum free stay 90 minutes, no return within the 1 hour.
Yep.
Any vehicle overstaying 90 minutes may be liable to a parking charge notice of £60.
Evidence, yep.
Evidence. Is that in case you get fined?
Yep. Have you got a particular favourite?
I'm intrigued by the hot crust buns.
I had to demonstrate where not to leave hot cross buns on the side of the surface if you don't want
you
Dennis
to eat them.
No, not me.
Sorry.
Not me. Well, in case I jump up and eat them in the night.
Or just leaving them out is high risk for you to go.
Well,
and
leaving them out is high
demolish
risk
them.
for me, but leaving them out there,
Okay.
they're going to end up in the dog.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I took
That went on the family WhatsApp chat.
correct.
Yeah, classic. Okay, these are my two.
So the first is a photo of the screen of Amelia's laptop, and on it says, "We're having trouble loading your messages. Try refreshing." And this is great. This is, I'm assuming,
It's right up your street.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've all done this. In fact, did I teach you how to do this? This looks like an electricity meter reading.
It is.
Fabulous,
It
yeah.
is.
I don't think that's particularly boring. I think that's what I would describe as good household services management.
Yes.
But you see, both of these pictures, I think, I mean, this is as much as it does about me and how boring I am. But I think this is why cameras were designed. Functional information. Chris, which wins it?
The meter reading, I've just got to quickly say, I mean, clearly you've had to get into quite an awkward position there, Amelia. And, and I appreciate that you've got the numbers dead in focus, which would have been challenging.
It is. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for appreciating that.
But I don't think anyone could ever make a photo of hot cross buns sound as boring as Jez. So I'm afraid to say Jez is the winner again this week.
Well done, Jez.
Thank you.
2-0. Kira Pollack is recognised worldwide as a creative leader who pushes the boundaries of visual storytelling. Her work has spanned interactive media, documentary film, fine art photography and print magazines, with roles at Vanity Fair, Time and the New York Times Magazine. Currently, she is a Walter Shorenstein Media and Democracy Fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School, exploring how AI-driven tools can deepen our understanding of visual history, support authorship and legacy, and provide new solutions for image analysis and discovery. Kira, welcome to the Being Human podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We have a tradition of exploring some get-to-know-you questions with our guests before diving into our topic for the episode. So with that, let me ask you, if you had a song that played when you entered the room, what would it be and why?
It's such a good question for so many reasons. Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. I know it's very 80s, but there's just something so inspiring about it. I love it. It's such a good question because I've been boxing. I have a boxing trainer. I've been boxing for the last couple of years, and he has been telling me about his walk-on songs. And one in particular, one of the questions is not just what is your favorite walk-on songs, but like, at what point in the song do you want to walk on?
Yeah.
Right? Because he was telling me about the song that he picked when he was a professional boxer, the Genesis song, In the Air Tonight. And it played in the beginning, and it just But that's what exactly. He wanted it to be like the drum roll, but it was like that long, quiet beginning. And so it's always, but Journey, I'm into the beginning of that song. So yes, that's my walk-on song.
What's the best piece of advice you've been given and who gave it to you?
When I was at the New York Times Magazine as a photo editor, my boss, Kathy Ryan, who was a great mentor of mine, had a rule in the office, no gossip. And it was a great piece of advice in some ways because, the way that she said, if you have anything to say about anyone else, come into my office and say it. And it just completely took that kind of energy out of the office. It was a very respectful place to work. And I feel in all of the places that I've managed since that job, that I've stuck with that rule. And it's really made a much more collegial places to work.
I can imagine. It's very powerful, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, something so simple, but actually really fundamental to the environment that you're trying to create at work and trying to create an environment that people can really thrive and work in rather than feeling like there's something going on behind their back that they don't know about.
For me, it sort of creates kind of a shared understanding of the truth and how we are and how we connect with one another. And I imagine must have created an environment where you felt like you belonged.
Absolutely. Safe and trusted and collegial and positive. You want to be in a positive environment, and that is where people thrive. And I think it's really important that you feel loved and respected and in a professional space.
Kira, what's the latest thing you've ticked off your bucket list?
Well, I was the global chair for World Press Photo this year, which was an extraordinary honor. It's such an incredible, the most important photojournalistic contest in the world, something that I've always looked up to. And I was the chair of the juries, and it was really an incredibly intense and rigorous and inspiring process in Amsterdam. They just announced the winner last week of the photo of the year, which was Carol Guzzi, an American photographer whose photograph of ICE and the separation of a family in the federal courthouse in New York City won the picture of the year. It was a family that went in for their regularly scheduled appointment, and the father was detained. So in the frame, you see it's two daughters that are just holding on to their father. Like you can see the hands, and you don't see his face, but you see him being pulled away. And there's just this extraordinary fear and powerlessness in these faces of these girls, these young girls that are in their teenagers. And it really stays with you.
Yeah, I have had the chance to have a look at it, and it is a extremely emotional photo. But I feel we're going to get into all of this and explore it. We've just got one more get to know you question before we dive in, if that's okay. What's a habit or behavior that you had as a kid that you still have today?
I've always loved taking pictures, not in a professional way, but just of people in my life and moments in my life. And, I was always the person taking pictures of my friends in high school and college, and I'm still doing all of that in my family. And, my mother was always giving me such a hard time. Stop taking pictures of me. And my father passed away a couple of years ago. And now she's so grateful that those pictures exist because it's moments in our lives over time. And so that's just always been, kind of a family recorder or a documentarian,
Kira, I'm sure many people have an idea of what a photographer does, but how many people have you found who know what a photo editor is? And how do you explain it to those who've never heard of your job before?
Yeah. Most people think photo editors are photographers, and they're not. I just said that I like taking pictures, but that doesn't mean I'm a photographer. But photo editors are sort of the people on the other end of the phone with the photographers. we are the people that actually commission the assignment in the first place. So at a magazine, traditionally, you have a story and a writer, and you're talking to the writer about the story as the photo editor and the editors of the story. And then you're trying to figure out who is the best person to translate this story visually. Could it be, is this a psychological portrait? Is this, a really over the top, hilarious picture? Those are all different styles of photography and all different styles of photographers with different authorship and different intent. And so it's just been, in my career, I've worked across all these genres of photography, whether it's photojournalism. If you have to send someone into a war zone, you need to send someone that has the skills to do that. If you're doing a cover of Nicole Kidman and you need a great fashion photographer, it's assigning that right person to do that job. And then it's working with them all the way along. And there's a lot of creative direction in the jobs that I've had. So thinking about, what are we trying to say? What is the story that we're trying to show in a photograph, especially on a cover? And then it's about, depending on who the photographer is, it's working back and forth with them.
Yeah.
And then editing the pictures, which is the title of the job, but that is only one aspect. And our job as photo editors also, I would say, is advocating for the photographer. So what pictures the photographer loves the most, and usually you agree with that. I would say mostly. And so you're then going to the editor and advocating for the pictures that you and the photographer like the most, and you understand the story in order to really boil it down for other people to understand it, because you're pushing for the pictures and how they should be seen. What is the opening picture? What is the cover? And so you're kind of on the front lines. So you're kind of all the way through the process. You're the visual advocate.
It hadn't occurred to me quite how much of a creative role you play as well. I imagine in some instances there are photographers who are incredibly creative themselves, but I imagine in other situations, actually the heavy lifting creatively comes from you and not the person holding the camera, perhaps.
It depends. It depends on, I think that the success of a great photo editor is picking the right photographer. Because photographers have such different skills, and some are really good creative directors themselves. Some of them are, I think when you talk about fashion photographers, so much is about the styling. Who are the stylists that this fashion photographer works with? Who are the hair and makeup? Who are the manicurists? Who are the set designers? Who are, there's so much that goes into it. Whereas like a photojournalistic picture is about capturing a moment and freezing it. And it has nothing to do with anything except what the photographer, the angles, what they're getting into the frame, how close they are to the action. So it really depends on, but I've been lucky, photo editing, different jobs are different types of skills for photo editing, but in the roles that I've been in, creative direction has been a big part of it. And that's been very exciting to be able to kind of work on an idea from the beginning, really always with the photographer and utilizing what their skills are already and like trying to come up with something new. Like a new picture was always the goal. How do you break through and do something new?
It sounds so interesting in terms of that being your day to day and all that collaboration across all the different types of people, photographers from every single process that you were just talking about there. It sounds really, really cool. Kira, tell us the story of how you got into being a photo editor. Where did it all begin?
I was always taking pictures, as I said before, and I really loved photojournalism. I was interested in that idea of traveling the world and documenting stories. And when I graduated, I was a creative writing major in college, and I actually studied a semester in Florence photography at an art school, which was fantastic. And when I got out of school and I was sort of, living in Connecticut, what am I going to do? How do I, and it was one of those, this person knew this person that knew this person that said, go into the New Yorker and show the photo editor at the New Yorker your pictures. I was like, 21 years old, like at my parents' house in Connecticut, took the train in, went in with my portfolio, which I had just done in Maine that summer, black and white pictures. And I met the photo editor who was awesome. And she was working for, Tina Brown was the editor in chief at that time. And that was like a very different time at the New Yorker. And so I met the great photo editor, and I showed her my work for like feedback, just I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And she called me that afternoon after I left and said, do you want to come in and work on the fashion issue? And it was like Jay McInerney was writing a piece on Chloe 70. It was like that era. And I was like, sure, I have no experience. I know nothing about this, but I loved stories and I loved photography and I loved writing. So I was working at the New Yorker and I was an assistant, and they would send me out to make pictures. This is like hilarious, but they would send me out to make photographs of people they were profiling that would then be used as reference for illustration. So like, the New Yorker is heavily illustrated. You don't really think about photography when you think about the New Yorker. So, they didn't have pictures of these people. They sent me. So I was like this kid with a camera. I looked like a photographer, but I wasn't really a photographer. I was like a faux photographer. And they didn't know that, though. The people I was photographing, like Tom Freston, these very quite important people, or Meryl Streep's acting coach, Harold Guskin. I remember, and I had to go and photograph them and make pictures. And then they would take my pictures and they would send them to an illustrator, and the illustrator would draw them. And so anyway, whatever, I got into it that way. And I did a lot of work with, Richard Avedon was the photographer there on staff. The kind of work I did there was a lot of photo research. And then from there, I went to the New York Times Magazine, and that's really where my career started. Assigning photography, working across all different genres of photography. But it blended all of those things. Like, how do you translate a story visually, and how do you work with different people it's very collaborative across the magazine, the writers, the editors, the art directors, the designers, all of those pieces come together in this really extraordinary ecosystem.
Did you know fairly early on then that photo editing was the direction, or did you follow your curiosity and your passion, and did it kind of evolve organically?
It was really interesting because I could have, I think it was great that I had that weird serendipitous job at the New Yorker where I was going out and photographing, because I realized I didn't want to do that. I would never have realized that. I really liked doing it for myself, and I didn't really want to be professionally doing it. And whether I was even good enough to do that is a whole other story. But you know what? I really loved like the idea of thinking about a picture and who would be the best person to work with on making that. And then doing all of the behind the scenes. Like, I mean, I became a producer, a really major producer where we would produce, like, it was so fun and it was so ambitious, the work that I've done over time with, teams of people. But one thing in particular that I remember when I was at the New York Times Magazine, we did an amazing portfolio called Obama's People, right? So it was right when he was elected, and it was during the time, in that transition time. He was elected, but he hadn't started office yet. So there was like a transition time. And we photographed everyone in his cabinet, and they hadn't even met each other yet. It was like this extraordinary group of people, in all different positions coming together, talk about diversity, talk about women, talking about, like, this was a really incredibly powerful group of people. And we did it in several days where we stacked up, 10 people a day, and Nadav Kander was the photographer, and he was in the studio, and we photographed in the Capitol. We photographed all of those people. And it was like single portraits that I was just scheduling with Kathy Ryan, the photo director. And it was like this amazing kind of document of history. I look back on those pictures now, comparatively to the cabinet that is currently in the White House, it was such an incredibly positive and optimistic moment in time. So I think what I really loved was making those things happen, and I liked something that was really ambitious and trying to make it work. Those are always my favorite things to do.
Coming back to something you said earlier about, something new, a new photo, something that hasn't been seen before, something that provokes new emotions. How do you, when the pressure's on and you're looking for that, how do you find the balance between giving the photographer kind of the clear brief and also leaving them enough wriggle room to sort of come up with their own angle or come up with something that really surprises you?
I think there's a balance there because you're hiring someone for a reason. So you don't want to over direct, but you want to make sure that they capture what you need, especially when you're at a more of a produced shoot. So I think there's a fine balance. Like I'm thinking, you're bringing me back down memory lane, but when I was at Time, one of the biggest things that we did every year was the Person of the Year. And one year, when Facebook was really coming, becoming a really major, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg was still very young, but we did Mark Zuckerberg. And, it's like a 30-page story in Time magazine, and it's this top secret thing. No one even on the staff would know what it was. Like, it was like very, very top secret. And I had worked with Martin Scholler, he's a great portraitist, to do this portfolio on Mark Zuckerberg. But Mark Zuckerberg, he didn't do much other than work. He worked all the time, but that was like a very hard picture to do, especially more than once. So, it's like you'd have the portrait on the cover, which is a very tight, beautiful. It's like a great document now looking back because it was like a very tight portrait so you could see how young he was. And he, like almost expressionless. That was just the way that's who he was, who he is. He didn't have that expression. But it was great. It was a great cover. And then we had to fill all of these pages inside. And I'm like, Martin and I were out there for a week. And I was like, how about, could he be like, in a rowboat under the Golden Gate Bridge, or like I was trying to come up with like all these different ideas with Martin that we were asking to do, or, okay, we'll do the office picture in open floor office. Like we could do all that, but we need to find the story. Like, who are his people? What is he? Does he drive his car to work? Nope. It was like everything. He like works all the time, and it was like there's got to be something. And so, like finally, the contact there was saying like, he does like to fence, and we were like, really? That's cool. Okay, so he's like, and he likes teaching a colleague's child to fence. And we were like, interesting. Like, this is becoming really interesting.
Yeah.
And so then Martin Schuller like went to San Francisco, went to this old like fencing club. It just had so much character. And he brought this fencing, and we were able to do it at his house, which we never could get access to, but he was moving. So there was like, it was kind of empty, and we were in the backyard. And so we had all of our things like, here's a fencing, you've got your fencing. Like, we thought he'd be Mark Zuckerberg and his fencing with this kid. And we get there, and Mark Zuckerberg's like, I'm not wearing that. And we were like, oh, you could see Martin's face, and his like heart just sank, like, oh, this is the picture. And actually he was in his hoodie, but the kid was in the fencing outfit. And the kid in the picture, it's so great because Mark is just standing there staring at the camera. And the kid is like this kid with the fencing and the whole thing. And it's so perfect. Like, you can't plan that. It actually, you know what I mean? So there's like that kind of serendipity in picture making is what makes a great portrait. If he was in a whole fencing outfit, which he would never do, it would never show through the character, and the actual person that he is. So that was like a really good example of that, I think.
But that capturing of someone's most authentic self is really challenging, because I think even when anybody goes to have a photo taking of themselves, you can only imagine what would be going through your head if you were going to be on the cover of that of that magazine, of like how you want to show up to people versus how you actually show up and how you make. And I can only imagine for you guys the job and the role of creating something that is so authentic to that person. And then I imagine when you take that photo or when you see it happening in front of you, your eyes must be lighting up of like, oh my God, we've got it now.
Yes. That was so good. I love that picture so much. It's one of my favorites. Maybe because it was so hard to get to that point too. So,
the hard work paid off.
Yeah. Photography's changed so much over the years. As we all know, it's like a medium based on technology. But it's also, the audience has changed so much in how people are seeing these pictures. And, you know, I think at one point you would get days of time with an important actor. And now you get 4 hours, or you get, when we did President Obama for Person of the Year one year, we were told 2 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, and he's busy.
Yeah.
You know, so that's okay. But like, you know, you have athletes, same, it's very hard. That's the kind of thing, like how sometimes you hire a photographer because of how quickly they can work within a very precise amount of time. You often don't get very much time with people.
We've talked in the past, haven't we, on an episode with Ben Goddard, who's a musician, about the sometimes the power that a constraint can bring. You know, if you've only got a certain amount of time, or you know, if it's a sort of a location constraint or whatever it might be, actually having those boundaries in some way kind of forces a creative process that ends up with a better outcome than perhaps had you had longer, or whatever it might be. It was interesting that it made me think differently about the kind of the power of constraints, if you like, in the creative process.
That's a really interesting way of saying it. I think that's true. And actually, to go back to that 2 minutes we had with President Obama, it was like a psychological thing that I thought of that we ended up doing, because Nadav Kander is such a pro. He's an incredible photographer. He was the photographer for this picture as well. I've worked with him many times over the years. And he had set up 3 different setups in this room at the White House. And so we would just go like, they're all lit and they're all ready. So you're 1, 2, 3, right? This is the cover. This is the next picture. This is the next picture. And so they told us, like, you know, first it was 15 minutes and then it was 2 minutes. And so I was like, I know that he'll get this really quickly, because I know how well he makes pictures and how fast he can be. So we went to like 1 minute and 45 seconds and I called it. I was like, okay, we got it. We got it. And they were so blown away that we did that, that they gave us the other 2 setups. Because most photographers, I think, and I mean, most of the shoots I'm on, we're like, oh no, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. But we just kind of said, okay, we're good. We respected the time. And then they gave us the 2 other setups. So you never, like, that was we were so psyched when we got that, because we thought, oh, we're going to have 1 picture out of, you know, that's not a lot, you know, but we got 3. So it was, you never know. It's like, there's always a serendipity that really is just how it's going to feel at the moment. What is the mood of the person you're going to photograph, you know, in any of those situations. But I think constraint, it's like, you have to be creative and you've got to be professional and on top of it, and things can happen with constraints. So that's a positive for sure sometimes.
Kira, you've talked about photographs that don't need captions, you know, images where the emotion and the story are completely immediately legible. What makes a photograph influential or powerful enough to speak without any words?
I led a project called the 100 Most Influential Photos of All Time. It was a fantastic kind of project to do at Time, especially because we worked with a lot of reporters not only, to pick those pictures. So the idea was, okay, we think it's not iconic pictures, it's influential pictures. To the point of your question, there are a lot of things that make a picture influential, which we learned. And it's not just the picture itself, it's the way that it's been disseminated. So a picture by Eddie Adams made in Vietnam that was published on the top right above the fold of a newspaper, seen by everyone in the world at the same time, had influence. And so, the decision to publish a picture, it would make it influential because it actually changed the course of the war. Like, those are the things that we reported out. Like, why is this picture influential? Or, well, it was brought to the U.S. government and it was held up, not that
Was
picture,
that,
but
am I right in thinking that's the one where there's a gun, right?
yes.
Yeah.
It's an incredible picture. And those are the ethics where you have to question, how you're going to publish it, where is it going to be published. But I think that a cover had that as well, a cover of a magazine, which I don't think it does anymore. But the kind of that dissemination of like where a picture was seen and how now you're seeing pictures through algorithms. So if you aren't you might never see that World Press photo because it doesn't come to you. And I think that's where we're very disconnected now. We don't have that community where everyone's looking at similar things at the same time. It's not all bad. I'm not saying that, but I also think that another thing that I've thought about a lot lately is that, especially in photojournalism, it's very much photographers see horizontally in photojournalism. Like their frame is a horizontal frame. It's a landscape frame. That works really well if you're looking at a magazine spread because it's almost the exact dimension of a 35 millimeter. Most of the magazines I worked at were that. It was like exactly. So it'd be full bleed, like exactly that frame. But if no one's looking at magazines right now, which I know is not the case, I think you have to realize that those pictures that were made horizontally are seen vertically. Like we see it on our phones. So that framing doesn't really have the same impact that it once had because the way it's disseminated is on a vertical platform. So either you're seeing it horizontally at the very top of your phone, very small with no impact, or it's being cropped to a vertical. And then you're losing the essence of what the frame is. And so, there's just a lot of things with technology that are shifting the way pictures are seen. But for me, a picture that's influential has emotion.
Yeah.
Like it has emotion. You can connect to it. You can think, this could be my life. This could be my kid. This could be my, and it creates empathy. I think empathy is the best photography creates a sense of empathy. And that is really, truly what photojournalism does that no other medium can.
It's really interesting. I had a feeling you would talk about the emotion and that we experience when we look at an image, but it hadn't dawned on me at all that it was about how it's brought to in front of us as well. How fascinating.
I think there's also something really interesting in that today's world, and Kira, you were touching upon this about how people aren't viewing the same photograph from the same newspaper that is, that's printed at 9 a.m. on a Monday, and that's when everybody views this one image. The context in which everybody engages with photography and media now is so varied, and actually, as photographers or photo editors or journalists, you don't have a lot of control over the way that people do receive the work that you've done.
Yeah, you just don't have a collective audience anymore.
Yeah.
Even people in your own tribe are not necessarily seeing the same things. So I think that's what's separating all of us, because pictures have this incredible ability to bring people together without a caption. Often captions are not always needed for pictures that are, I would say influential, but that just have impact. And I think the visual impact, like the real estate of a Time cover around the world at every airport, at every like that had power. And
Mm.
now like ju- who's buying a magazine at an airport? And I love magazines. But I also started realizing like no one's really in a nail salon. You'd have piles of magazines. No one's looking at them. They're all looking at their phone. So they're all looking at whatever's on their phone in their own way. So what is influence? What's an influential picture? I mean, okay, well, the Artemis 2,
Yeah.
there's a new picture that was made that is influential, like absolutely. So that it's not to say that those pictures aren't being made still but you have to realize that it's it's not one collective community that is looking at something at a time.
So what goes into making a cover image that both captures a person and carries a whole issue or a whole cultural moment on its shoulders? Is it just luck?
I think sometimes, yeah, there's always luck involved. I think it's many different things, but it's also a zeitgeist moment. Like
Yeah.
I think one thing, when I was at Vanity Fair, you have a monthly magazine, so and you're shooting those pictures months before they come out. So you're picking people for the cover months before. Um, that was very different from Time Magazine, where we would close the magazine on a Wednesday and it was under my door on a Thursday. So you could work within the metabolism of that pace of who you're choosing for the cover, what you're doing on the cover. When Steve Jobs passed away, we had already closed our issue at Time. Everyone came back. It was we had won some award and everyone was at the bar downstairs and everyone came back to the office and closed an entire issue in one evening, like by 2 a.m. And I flew to LA the next morning and it was on the newsstand when I got off the plane. Like that's pretty extraordinary metabolism again. So if you're, depending on when a monthly magazine cover hits the newsstand and what's happening in the world around that time, sometimes it's perfect zeitgeist. Sometimes it's just gets overshadowed by other things. So I'd say that zeitgeist is really important about the person and what you're trying to say. Sometimes it's a picture that's just super, super impactful and making a decision to publish it. Again, a time when I was there, it was this picture of a young woman whose nose and ears were cut off by the Taliban. And Rick Stengel was the editor in chief at the time. And it was, the picture came in and I believed in it as a cover image. It wasn't a story necessarily about her, it was about women in Afghanistan. But it was something that as a team, we all decided. I mean, Rick decided he had the final choice. Of course, that was his. But if that picture was published inside the magazine, it would never have had the impact that it had on the cover. Like choosing something with that depth, and that power, it's a tough also decision because you're putting a young woman. We knew she wouldn't be in danger. She was being flown to the US. And, there were a lot of things that we went into those decisions, but also it's going to be on everyone's coffee table and children will see this picture. There's no hiding from it, so you have to there are a lot of ethical decisions like that. Anyway, I feel like that picture for me was a great, great decision of publishing something powerful on the cover in that way.
Kira, earlier we were talking about your role as the sort of global jury chair for the World Press Photo of the Year. I just have to ask, how on earth, with all those photos that you have in front of you, do you make the decision on which is number one? What is the room like with, the people who are making that decision, and how do you even come to that? Because the photos that I've seen as part of the, collection that have come through are all absolutely amazing.
It was not easy, I will say. I think there are a lot of factors that go into it, and there's a lot of pressure that we all put on ourselves as the stewards this year. It's World Press Photo of the Year, and it was 7, members of the jury from all over the world that have different views of the news of the world, like what is important now versus what is important last year. I think it was, you know, we all come with different points of view and we have different experience, and ultimately photo editing is subjective. What you believe is a good picture is coming from your own training, your eye, and how you can articulate, what it is that moves you about a picture, what brings you into it. So, we believed that this story was really a critical story of immigration in the US, what's happening here, what's happening with ICE, the detainments, the disappearances generally that are happening. And, for me too, it was about that picture was that one was made in August, but that story is just getting more important every minute of every day. And it's again to the point of this dissemination. It's important to see a picture like that worldwide. And World Press has a platform to do that because they now will have exhibitions all over the world. That picture will be in the opening of the exhibition. To the point of, yes, there were so many great pictures. And it's very hard to pick one because also this picture that we chose was part of a story. So you go through each region and there's a jury chair for each region. And each of those jury chairs has already had a regional jury before they even come to the global table.
Okay.
So, I was like, one of 7. The other 6 were jury chairs of these regions. So they had a lot of incredible insight on, of course, their own region, what mattered to their region, the regional photographers that were chosen, that were telling the story locally. I think that in the career that I've had, there's a lot of sending people into places. And now there's so much good work everywhere, photographers that are really working those regions. So you end up, going through all of those regions and picking the best stories. And then the photo of the year comes from, I keep saying, like, we had a wall. I was like, let's print them out old school. So we would print them out and then we put them on the wall. So we had this wall going all week. At the end, we just had this huge wall of photographs. And so we were constantly like looking at them, that's that kind of beauty of the analog, taking them in all week and seeing them. And then we'd spend a couple of days on the picture of the year. So it was hard. It was rigorous and intense. And we came to a decision, that I truly stand behind.
When they're all up on the wall, did you know quickly that would be the one, and then go through the process of judging and applying a sort of a sense of criteria or something, and then coming back to that one? I suppose that what's behind my question is, did gut feel play a part early on? Did you instinctively know it's that, and then come back to that, or did it emerge after a process?
For me, there were a couple that really stood out throughout the week that I knew. I mean, some of them were incredible pictures, but they're so rooted regionally that it felt like, again, like that platform of picture of the year. It had to be like a real global idea or in my mind, that it
something
needed,
of global significance, perhaps.
Yeah. There were some great pictures that were made that just didn't have that were winners, but they didn't have that like extra layer that brought them to that level of World Press Photo of the Year.
I was thinking about the work you're doing with Harvard Kennedy School and looking at sort of photography archives. It feels like we're at a point in time where you look at photos, the subject matter, the place, the things that are in it, the people and so on. Going forwards, because of the way technology now works, those images are never going to be a mystery. to us. My suspicion is, my hunch is that moving forward, you'll be able to point a phone at an image and it will tell you, and very quickly, somehow technology will be able to tell you who the person is in that picture and where they were born and when they died, perhaps, and who they were, and or if it's of a place, you'll be able to get real detailed information about the place it was taken. Whereas looking back in the past, when images were taken, I look in my family albums of black and white pictures that maybe my grandparents took in the 1920s and 30s of people. There's just a mystery, and I think that the unknown I find really interesting, because it allows me to create stories and to wonder and to question who these people were and what were they doing and what did their lives mean. And all of my worry is that all of that's, with technology, all of that opportunity for imagination, if you like, goes away, or some of it does anyway. I don't know.
I would say, don't worry. There's still going to be a ton of mystery.
Good.
You're never going to know who those people are in your albums. No, I think that you bring up a really good point, because technology will probably be able to tell you where the person was standing, whatever, like the very basic information. And this is what I've been working on at Harvard, and I'm really fascinated by. So you have that kind of basic caption of the people in the picture, and AI is really good at that, like on a very deep level, recognizing, interpreting. I've been told to say interpret through a lot of professors that I've talked to, not say see. They're not seeing, AI does not see. But I've been looking at like big archives that particularly photojournalists have, which are extraordinary and overwhelming amounts of pictures from the visual history of the world. And the photographers are all alive and well, and they're still shooting, but they are accumulating more and more pictures every day. And where are these pictures going? And so what I've been looking at is like, how does AI kind of contextualize, help scale all of that to make it discoverable, make it accessible? How can it do that at scale? Because really the way that you're quite literally typing in captions on every single picture. That is how it works still. It's like for even professional photographers, that's how it works. And certainly there's, we all have our iPhones where we can see like that, the pink dress that my daughter wore and edit everything from there. Or we can, you can find pictures in a way now that you never could. And like, I am actually fascinated by my daughter, who's 10, who can she's just such a different relationship with pictures than I do, because of the way she searches and finds and, on my phone. But back to your point about the mystery, I think the mystery, some parts of it might be explained, but you'll never have the part of it that you want that's meaningful to you, because you don't have that personal connection of like, what is the meaning to you? Who were these people? And that is something I'm working on solving, in terms of how we can capture that through audio, and that story and context is kind of also part of the story of the picture. So like the oral history piece of it, working right now with photographer Christopher Morris, who I've been working with for a couple of years now in his archive, but we've been taking like the most amazing stories. Like he'll be like, let's try this. North Korea, 2005. I was like the third Western photographer to ever go in there. Like, it's always so interesting. But, I'm writing my paper right now for Harvard, so I'm actually like really thinking about this. But you can pull an incredible caption in AP style journalistically, like with very basic information, like the date and the location. It can tell you quite a bit about the picture. But it's the thing that you don't get from that caption, which is Chris Morris went in there for Time Magazine. He was there as a writer because they wouldn't allow a photographer, but he has brought all of his cameras and put them in like a woman's purse, like all of these things. He had to work with a minder for the whole 5 days he was there, what he was allowed to shoot and what was absolutely off limits was, most of what he photographed. He had to make those pictures. He photographed a lot of it out of car windows, going a certain speed and a certain setting on the camera, like explaining that. And that tells you a lot more about North Korea,
Yeah.
right? That you would never get in a caption like, this man is fishing at a
No,
pond.
you're so right. It's the kind
Right?
of, you can capture the kind of the explicit data around the photo, can't you? But it's the
Yes.
implied story,
It's the story.
and the narrative and
Or the emotion of the person in it. You don't know what
Yeah.
they're thinking or how their day is, and so I think there's still lots of room for imagination. And
so I can rest easy. Is that what you're saying?
I think
Okay,
you
good.
can take
Yeah.
a big deep breath. You're good.
Maybe where this has stemmed from in me is this realization that both my parents are still alive,
Mhm.
but they won't be forever, and I feel a duty to spend time with them, asking them about the people in these family photo albums, because there will come a time when no one will know who they were.
Yeah. I mean, we all have those pictures in our families' homes that have like pencil captions on the back. That's like
Yeah.
Susan or something, like with the date on it. Like that. What
Yeah.
does that mean? It's like and I think, it's the story underneath that of like how this person was related to you. What was this person's story?
Yeah.
Who was she? Like and those are the things that only human beings can tell because they're about relationships, they're about emotion, they're, about story. And so AI can fill that in, but it won't have the meaning, that it will from a first person. And yeah, like I feel like I've been fascinated by that. And in my career, I've been fascinated by that because that's what I've always done. I've been on this other end of the phone with photographers in Syria and, all over the world that are calling in at all different time zones. And you're hearing very firsthand tough stories that they're taking great risks for.
Mm.
And what, and then I go get the pictures, bring them to the editors, then the designers, then and then they get published. What does the audience see? The AP style caption,
Yeah.
right? It's just like the very basic who, what, when, where, why, but no one's getting that photographer's voice of the story of that picture. You get the writer's story of the piece, but again, that's like the structure of journalism. That's fine. But the photographer's voice, I think, is like any voice, just getting that oral history is really important. So that's what I'm working on.
The kind of AI generated imagery and films that we are served with now, is that the most sort of urgent ethical question that photographers and photo editors need to be asking themselves right now, or is there a bigger challenge that we face, do you think, in terms of the truth and how we present the truth through imagery and the emotions that images evoke?
Yeah, I think that we're in a perfect storm because we have a real free fall in journalism right now, even though journalism to me is such an important mission, really. And the journalists I know are just the smartest people on the planet. I love that industry so much. And it's so upsetting what's happened with this disinformation, mostly through visuals.
Mm.
I mean, even the White House correspondent, like this horrible thing that happened the other night, that gunmen came into the White House correspondent, and everyone, like all through social media, this was staged, and it's just immediately people don't believe anything,
Yeah.
Mm.
even though like it's a room full of journalists that are photographing it. I think we're in a really tough spot with that. At the same time, Washington Post laid off, a huge number, I want to say hundreds of journalists this year, and including the 8 staff photojournalists at the Washington Post and half their photo editing staff. So you have this disbelief and you have this generative, these generative pictures that are being made and disseminated through social media. And then you have less professionals out there actually doing the work. One of the things that really struck me about World Press was that so much of that work was self-funded.
Mm.
The winner, Carol Guzzi, spent 5 months in New York City couch surfing at her friends' homes because she was documenting the story of ICE in the courthouses. She lives in Washington, D.C. She never had an assignment to do that work. She won the World Press Photo of the Year. And so you have this kind of weird thing happening where you have less professional photojournalists out there because of the economics of, of journalism right now. And you have less photo editors that are trained to investigate what is real and what is not before it goes to publication. And then you have a lot of pictures that are just flying around that aren't real. So it's a weird moment. But I would say, there's so much ethically could do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah.
But one thing I would say from the work that I've done in the last, I guess, 3 years since I left Vanity Fair, and I've been working, I was at Stanford before, now I'm at Harvard, and I'm almost done with this fellowship. I think education on AI is critical. Uh, you can't just hide in a corner and say, and just be angry about it, because it is a massive umbrella of technologies. And some of them are going to be extremely useful, and some of them are very scary. And I just think that it's important that we all learn as much as we can about what's happening, because it's here. And, the more that we understand it, the more someone would just said, the root of fear is misunderstanding. And I think that's true. You've got to just try to learn about it as much as you can so that you have some kind of sense of like, what is this and what's going to happen? Because there's such a small group of people that hold those keys in our world right now. So that's what I've been telling photographers and artists and writers, like, yes, a lot of photography, and I mean, so much has been scraped and used and, not fair and all of that. But now it's like, okay, you got to learn about it. You have to understand it and get ahead of it as much as you can versus having the world of technology just tidal wave us all over. Try to get ahead of it is what I try to tell people. Not that I am, but that I'm actively, engaged with it, and I'm trying to understand it.
And I think perhaps, for people looking at images and watching films, ever more important, I think, is the willingness to be curious about the source and what it's saying and what am I supposed to be taking away from this. The critical thinking in essence,
absolutely,
becomes key and paramount, isn't it?
I know it's weird because it's like seeing is believing, but it's not, right? It's like that a photograph was the thing that proved that it was real, and now it's doing the opposite. It's like no one believes that it's a real picture. And I think that's hard to correct. I don't know how that gets corrected. I think it's a viewpoint that I don't know how you get that back. I think that it's important what I'm looking at, in addition to photojournalists working in the field right now, I'm working with photojournalists that are also contextualizing their archive. And I think it's important with that rich visual history that we are also preserving that provenance. Like, this is real.
Yeah.
This is not like rewriting history visually however you want. These are the real pictures. These are the witnessed pictures of the world. And those photographers that documented that were a very small group of people, ultimately, like over the decades. It wasn't like it is now. And they were professional journalists. And so I think it's really important that we try to capture that somehow before those photographers are gone, just to the point, like your photo albums. It's like, we need those contextualized by the makers that will show a kind of provenance of our collective history.
Final question for you, Kira, that we ask all of our guests to finish off the conversation. What does the words being human mean to you?
I keep the word empathy is in my head, and I feel like only humans can feel empathy. And being human, I wish for more empathy in the world. I think it's what's lacking right now. Empathy and kindness. That's the thing that I think is only human, being human.
Fabulous. Thank you, Kira. Your world is absolutely fascinating and you are just brilliant. So thank you so much for coming on our podcast with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. What an amazing person. And what a fabulous conversation. Where to begin, the importance of story, the joy of working together with others, the collaboration, the power of creativity, the interplay between truth and perception. Kira's point about the nature of serendipity as well. And lastly, the final thing she said about empathy, our capacity to feel what others are experiencing, particularly if maybe they see the world differently, and how images and visual storytelling are a way into this much needed human capability.
Yeah, and I think just what an amazing job she has and what she's seen and the project she's been involved with around the world. I think, it was something which I didn't really know anything about until we've unpacked it all with Kira. I think the collaboration that's involved in really bringing a vision and story to life and making sure that you're telling the story that you really want to tell was super, super interesting. And the idea of knowing that it's going to be consumed in ways out of your control must be a real challenge for photographers and journalists and photo editors to have to deal with.
You've got to trust the work though, right?
Exactly. And a story is always being told. So, how do you focus that and make sure people are, hearing, reading and seeing the story that you really, really want to tell? I think, the phrase of a picture is worth 1,000 words really does ring true. And yeah, a lot to take away and think about from that conversation. It was really, really powerful.
That's all we have time for on today's episode, but there's a whole back catalogue of amazing conversations we've had if you're hungry for more.
Thank you all for listening to the Being Human podcast.
Please do hit the follow button, share the podcast with your friends and colleagues, and leave us a review on whichever platform you're using.
And if you've got any suggestions on topics that you would like us to explore, or you would like to talk to us and our colleagues around the world about the work that we do as Just Add Water, we would always love to hear from you.
So get in touch and stick around for the bloopers.
You've been listening to the Being Human podcast. Brought to you by Just Add Water. Nurturing individual brilliance, forging collective strength.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Is it my turn to ask a question?
Yes, which one are you going to go for?
I was so interested in, I completely lost track of where I was. Yeah.
Same as-
What an amazing conversation. I'm looking at you like you're supposed to respond there, and then you didn't.
And I didn't.
And then I got lost.
Okay, okay, go again. Killer. That was Kira and Tell together. That's all we have time for in today's episode, but there's a whole back catalogue of amazing conversations we've had. If you're hungry for more, why would you do that?
Sorry.
I was trying so hard to ignore you.
Okay, have another go.